Hey, I'm Lauren, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Book of Learning and Forgetting. I'm going to review it for you. In this video, we're going to summarize the book. We're going to provide 5 big points from the book, and along with 5 favorite quotes. We're going to talk about whether or not I recommend it and any questions after reading it. So this book has 3 main points to it. It talks about how we learn as children, we join groups, we acquire language, and we join clubs. The clubs is a really big point. Number 2 talks about the history of education. The traditional education is pretty stupid, and talks about how testing is killing our students. Finally, it talks about the field of education and how it should change, and how teachers have an impact, and how we should be changing our schools and ourselves. So, let's talk about the 5 big points. The 5 big points in this book are, number 1, that children learn from language. They learn from acquiring language. They learn from the groups that they join when they speak. When they speak in schools, they learn which groups they should assimilate with. They don't really try to learn the language. They learn it effortlessly. There's no hard work to learn the English language for English-speaking students or any language. Point number 2 is talking about how education has changed over time. How education has been used to build militaries. How education has been used to form societies, how militaries work and are structured mirror oftentimes how our schools work and how our schools are structured. And it starts to talk about two big views, the classic view of learning and the official view of learning. The classic view of learning is mostly social, using other people to help you. It talks about the environment, the experiences, and the connections you build. Also, the official version of learning is standardized and processed and testable and scientific. So, point number 4 is how did learning theory impact our schools and our regulations, and like I said a minute ago, our military. All of these social structures are formed by how we interpret learning, how we interpret taking in new information. So how do we teach our students? How do we tell that what we're teaching them is sticking? Finally, a big point in this whole book is how the children and how our future are going to be shaped by our understanding of how we learn. Technology and how that impacts our education is big, and also how we can change ourselves and how we understand learning and how our schools and regulations can change. So where are we steering the ship? Where are we trying to take our schools? Also, there's some quotes I'd like to point out. Quote number 1 talks about the official theory that learning requires structure and effort has enormous destructive power. People who have negative self-images and who have been told that they're problem readers, or that there are behavior issues, or when their teachers say negative things or parents say negative things, they believe this, and those thoughts become destructive and toxic. So it's important for us to remember everybody learns differently. Quote number 2 talks about how for learning to take place effortlessly, you must be a member of the club. Now, Frank Smith talks a lot about clubs that people join and how being a part of that club enables you to learn easier. So if you feel like you're in a group, it'll be easier for you to learn. But if you're outside of that group, it's going to be more difficult for you to learn something. Quote number 3 talks about testing. One of the original purposes for testing was to determine which people were qualified to be sent to the pair's lunatic asylums. Now, let's remember that testing is a huge support in education today, and teachers use it to measure and quantify student learning. So, if we can figure out other ways to determine if there's knowledge, and Frank Smith talks about these other ways, if we can find these other ways and utilize them, then we won't be so attached to the way that people have always been testing. Quote number 4 talks about Vygotsky and his zone of proximal development. But Frank Smith points out what Vygotsky didn't point out was explicitly is that one of the things constantly in the zone of proximal development is our self-image and beliefs, what we will or will not be able to learn and be capable of learning. So if we remember that we learn with other people around us, then it'll help our learning structures, creating activities that involve collaboration. But once someone decides that they're not a part of a group, as we mentioned earlier, then it becomes more difficult for them to learn. They don't have any help. So, quote 5 talks about doubters can learn from participation as much as anyone else. Now, Frank Smith is talking about how we can get other people on board with this classical learning technique rather than the official. So if we have our administrators and our teachers and our parents, all these folks coming together and experiencing learning from a collaborative environment, one that really promotes the classical way of learning, it's a holistic model that we all are a part of. This will come together to support even people who doubt the way that we have education in place, the way that we teach in our schools. So some questions after reading this book is, number 1, is there a place for testing? Number 2, should we have students choose what they learn? If they join the groups, should they just go down that route of the group that they joined? And to what extent should our government be involved in educational formatting? Number 4, maybe we should revisit the role of education in our communities. But what are the objectives of public education, of education in general? And finally, the big question I have is, what is the best way I can prepare my child to be happy and successful? If he learns effortlessly, what do I want him to learn effortlessly? So, do I recommend this book? Well, it depends on who wants to read it. I think people that are open-minded and understand that learning is not as simple as listening, sitting still, paying attention, and doing your homework. Why do I recommend this book? Well, I think teachers see themselves as positive world changers. Teachers understand that they make a difference in our communities, and they see their role in human history. It's a big picture, and teachers are steering the ship to our future. This book does a great job at looking at history, at talking about eugenics and how social engineering has taken place, not as a part of history like hundreds of years ago, but only within the past few generations. So yes, I do recommend this book. I like how it is objective. There is a lot of sarcasm, which might make it difficult for some people to understand, but if you're a part of the sarcasm group, it's easy to understand. So yes, I do recommend it. Thanks for listening.